her at the head, each and every one of them functioned as a killing machine. They're all former paratroopers from the Soviet war in Afghanistan, with enough training to win World War III.
Something about this piece of dialogue felt odd to me the first time I heard it. Specifically this part.
With enough training to win World War III.
Let's pause for a second. Someone asked me a while back about my opinion of the anime Black Lagoon. To be accurate, the person told me they think it shits all over another anime I spoke about in a previous video, Jormungand. Black Lagoon just so happened to be one of many anime I never quite got around to watching over the years, and so I was unable to defend the honor of Jormungand, a show I genuinely like. And so I rushed to do what any self-respecting weeb would do. I got around to watching Black Lagoon eventually, nearly a year later, so I could make this video. Now that we're up to speed, I think I know what's wrong here. Let me show you the same clip with the original Japanese audio and subtitles.
彼女を頭脳とし、全員が一個のキリングマシンとして機能する。第三次世界大戦を戦えるだけの訓練を受けた。百戦錬磨のアフガン機関兵たち。
That's a bit more grounded and realistic, but still pretty wild to say. Hang on, let me check the manga just to be sure. Now let's see here. Basically the same, huh? So you're saying that Balalaika and her subordinates, elite soldiers from the fallen Soviet Union, veterans of the Afghan conflict, have enough expertise in all necessary areas of logistics, covert operations, intelligence gathering, and active combat using an assortment of different tactics, such that they can make a significant impact in a conflict on the scale of what a Third World War would represent? I mean, that description probably isn't literal, right? Like, that's the kind of legendarium you would use to describe characters from John Wick. Now that I think about it, from crime families to the Continental to contract killers, there is an almost fantastical order to the things in the world of John Wick, like medieval games of courtly graces, of kings and lords and the rules at play. That is because it exists in its own hyper-reality, where the rules are sacred and breaking them is punishable by death. Even at times when death isn't hanging over their heads, people are still honor-bound through oaths and rituals. It is a hyper-reality of codes of honor, forged in blood. A hyper-reality doesn't need to be bound by all the rules of regular reality, as long as it establishes its own guiding principle. Just the same as all hyper-realities. I don't think a house made of candy and sweets could actually exist, but I accept the hyper-reality, the fairy tale, of Hansel and Gretel. I don't think a tortoise and a hare would actually race each other, and a hare certainly doesn't have the intelligence or at least the foolhardiness to take a nap because it has a head start, but I accept the hyper-reality of the original fable. Therefore, I can accept and most certainly enjoy the fable, the fairy tale, of John Wick. And furthermore, I can accept the hyper-reality, the fable and fairy tale of Black Lagoon. Yes, Balalaika and her subordinates have the power and capabilities to fight through World War III, not because it is realistic, but because of what they represent. But more on that later. Further to the point, the hyper-reality of Black Lagoon is that Ruanapur, the fictional city at the core of the story, is a necropolis. Speaking of Hansel and Gretel, though, we see very few children in either Black Lagoon or Jormungand, besides the tragically fucked up twins, this little shit, and on the other side, Jonah and the children he helped to rescue, there aren't any other children at all. Well, there is the mini-maid, but for reasons I will get into later, she doesn't exactly count. We can exclude the little shit because he is only there to help give a touch of nuance and humanity to Roberta's story. We can also exclude Jonah's friends, because they do much the same for him, along with solidifying his backstory. What we have left is the perfect dividing line between these two anime. Jonah and the twins are both characters with tragic backstories, and are both forced to live lives of criminality. However, Ranapur is a necropolis, as even the story itself states, is a city of the living dead. The people who come there are either those who have already symbolically died in their previous lives, and are now waiting for their clocks to run out, or those paying the dead a toll for passage through their lands, in a metaphorical sense at least. Both symbolically and literally, Ranapur became the final resting place of the twins, like ghosts continuing the actions of their previous life until they fade away. The twins perpetuated the monstrous acts they were trained to embody, even turning on those who hired them, because now that they were in Ranapur, the very nature of the city would inevitably both fuel and extinguish the spark of violent depravity that was their life. Question though, who wins this fight? Two murderous orphans, or entire squads of experienced criminals, some of whom are trained soldiers? Before we answer that question, let's look at the other murderous orphan in the room, so we can begin to address the assertion of the title of this video. What distinguishes Jonah from the twins isn't merely his status as a protagonist, but also the story Jormungand is trying to tell. Jormungand might use a few fictional countries and conflicts, but unlike Black Lagoon, it is not hyperreality. The twins in Black Lagoon exist as a way to showcase the darkest depths of the world that all the characters exist in. Through the eyes of a child, Ranapur and the people connected to it exist as a purgatory where hope is swallowed up within violent indulgence. This is also the reason, which I referenced earlier, why two children could so effectively murder dozens of mafiosos, because it effectively represents who the twins are and their purpose in the narrative. It might be all edge, but there is a point. An introspective look at the inner desires and lives of people whose lives are at their darkest. And most importantly, people who have chosen to live and thrive within that darkness. Jonah's role in Jormungand is to showcase the deepest truth of a world filled with crime, war, and violence. Through the eyes of a child, conflict is reduced to its simplest terms. Someone must always profit in the end. The lives which revolve around this truth are shaped by the ripple effects of this profiteering. But the focus is less on how dark reality is, and more on how people relate to this truth. This is why the characters in Black Lagoon are often cast in a mythic light. People who don't simply stand on their deeds and actions, but on the legend of who they are and what they represent. In Jormungand, to be a legend, a mythic figure, an icon of renown, is to constantly stand on a precipice, a sword of Damocles above your head, while the true powers of the world pull the strings in the background. This all ultimately begs the question, between Rokuro Okajima and Jonathan Marr, who wins? Between Black Lagoon and Jormungand, which is the best series? The answer? It depends on what you're looking for. We'll look at two primary aspects of shared storytelling between the two series. We'll call the first part the wider world. I already made several insights into the nature of Ranapur, but there's one thing I never did. I never spoke about any other location in Black Lagoon. That's because there aren't any other locations. Not really, anyway. Other places highlighted, whether other places in Thailand and surrounding countries, or locales further afield, are all portrayed in terms of how the heroic scoundrels from Ranapur affect them. The eternal purgatory of the city spills into various places, either revealing inherent truths, for example, the state of organized crime in a Japanese city, and whether people are upholding Yakuza traditions, or trampling on them, or Ranapur's corrupt influence acting as a seductive force, eventually grinding them down or swallowing them whole. It's also the reason why Rock was given the opportunity to return to his previous life, even in the midst of an ongoing and brutal turf war. His hometown itself was never in danger from a narrative or symbolic point of view, but he needed to decide whether he would have a symbolic resurrection into his old, peaceful, oblivious life, or if he would choose purgatory, the symbolic undeath of Ranapur's necropolis, and the new life and new personhood he would choose to embody. This is also why he consistently chose the most dangerous path of pissing off both Revi and Balalaika, because his existence within the shadows required him to embody something only he could. Because Rock is neither a warlord nor an expert killer. Rock is a kingmaker. Where Jormungand is concerned, there isn't any real separation between the light and the shadows. Specific locations matter a lot less than geopolitics. Much like the Lagoon Company, Coco's mercenary group spends a lot of time riding in vehicles. The key difference is what these vehicles represent. For Lagoon Company, the boat represents their capability and skills in handling the jobs they are given. For Jonah and his allies, the ship they sail on and the plane they use represents freedom to go where they will and do as they please. Unlike Ruanapur's darkness spilling into other areas, or revealing the distinctions between light and shadow, Jonah, Coco, and the other mercenaries find darkness wherever they go. Whether it be local warlords, corrupted government officials, criminal businessmen, or intelligence agents riding the razor's edge of the law, the light is never separate from the darkness, but rather a murky mixture. As Jonah views it, even those whose actions have a measure of virtue are still playing a part in a much bigger game of profits. To the profiteers, it doesn't matter which criminal, or politician, or state actor, or corrupt mogul is in control of a location, so long as they can continue to pull the strings in the background, and profit as a result, just as Coco and her brother Casper do throughout the series. In essence, Jonah is a pawn in a grand chess game, and he is well aware of this fact. He is also aware of the fact that his proximity to Coco means that he is always one step away from being elevated to become a rook, a knight, a bishop, but still a piece on the board, never a player. This is why Coco chose to go from player to chess piece, in an attempt to manipulate the board in a way that someone who is only a player could never do, so she could flip the board. Jonah becomes a player by proxy, even if not completely by choice. This leads us to the second aspect of storytelling we'll be looking at: introspection and personhood. A common thread exists with a number of characters, from Revi to Roberta to Balalaika, and the same thread exists with Jonah, as well as other mercenaries in Coco's employ like Valmet. While everyone in both of these series have gone through hardships, the ones I named have all suffered deep trauma that continues to live with them. The difference is how the narrative represents this trauma, and by extension, this is also why I said the Mini-Maid doesn't count, because she's an abstraction of Roberta's persona, a lethal character whose presence and aesthetics seem rather out of place. But we'll get back to that in a bit. In Black Lagoon, characters like Revi and Balalaika use the purgatory of Ruanapur to mask their trauma, drowning in the most guttural, violent, and dark aspects of who they are, to cover the fact that they long to exist in the light. It's why Revi is drawn to what she thinks is Rock's purity, and why Balalaika dreams of fighting for a worthy cause, while sufficing to exist in the dregs. The world outside of Ruanapur moves on, through political unrest, social change, and geopolitical games, but we barely see any of it, because those are concerns of the living, and our focus is on the symbolic dead. In Jormungand, the traumas and wounds of Jonah and Valmet are actually resolved, unlike what happens in Black Lagoon. Jonah safeguards the safety and happiness of the other orphans he helped to rescue, and Valmet managed to get revenge on the man who took her eye and ruined her life. These actions were possible not because they are more capable than Revi and Balalaika, but rather because even these tiny measures of catharsis and redemption did not matter on a grand scale. Jonah and Valmet are still chess pieces in the grand game being played by Coco, Casper, and every other major player. Their every action still plays into the grand scheme of those who rule the world through war and conflict profiteering, a principle that Jonah recognizes from the beginning, and one that Rock came to understand through his machinations while walking a perilous tightrope. This is why Roberta's story can be compared very easily to Valmet's, after a fashion. The difference is that Roberta's story begins with her being a mythic figure and slowly transforms into her being a lost and broken person. I mean, she starts out as a combat maid who walks through armies of well-armed criminals. She starts out by transcending the hyperreality of her story and becoming a fantasy character. In that regard, that's mostly why the Mini-Maid exists. Roberta goes from being mythical to being a nuanced character, and the Mini-Maid is meant to replace her as the mythical idea of an unstoppable combat maid. The Mini-Maid exists to serve the rule of cool, just like Roberta did in her first appearance. And there's nothing wrong with that, but as a result, her narrative cannot embody a child's perspective. As for Roberta, through pain, mental instability, and severe trauma and loss, the gritty and guttural signatures of Black Lagoon, she manages to reach a resolution to her story, albeit a Pyrrhic victory. However, just like with Jonah and Valmet in Jormungand, this victory doesn't matter on the larger playing field, the geopolitical war games which exist beyond Ruanapur's borders. By that merit, Jormungand and Black Lagoon are two stories which might as well be taking place in the same world. Two sides of the same coin. One side about the small vital stories that make up the grand tapestry of global conflict and control, and the other side about the living dead, living in and ruling the shadows of this world, while dreaming about the light. So, which is a better story, Jormungand or Black Lagoon? That question is irrelevant. The only question that matters is, which side of the coin do you like better? I can only hope that through this analysis, I have given you a better appreciation for both. Thanks for watching, and in turn, I need to thank the viewers who recommended Black Lagoon to me so I could finally stop procrastinating and actually watch it, even if their goal was to prove a point in a picaresque manner. Tell me what you think. Are Black Lagoon and Jormungand two sides of the same coin? Or do you think I missed an important angle? If you want to have further discussions, you can join my Patreon, where I discuss the videos I'm making in more depth as I'm writing them, and you get to have early looks at the scripts. If you can't, then simply liking the video, subscribing, and giving me your views and even disagreements in the comments is still a major help to me crafting better videos in the future. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next video.